software, and so we're going to show some video. We went to this ICE chat earlier. It was pretty interesting. It was pretty enjoyable. Got some good video. We had Congressman Andy Levin and Congressman Debbie Dingel and okay, somehow I got this put on comedy. I'm gonna have to change this later. So I want to see if I'm gonna play this video and make sure it's working. Okay, so just testing, make sure this is working, the sound's working. Okay, sorry, for those just tuning in, I'm new to the OBS software, so I want to see if the capture from the sound, so didn't appear to be working. I apologize. So I'm going to have to unplug the microphone and get the speaker.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for coming.
I'm here. I sent you like a text and I never followed up. Why should have put you? I know, right? Like half that I did every
That was the second person that I had to do. And it was always this hard.
Somebody I know.
Yeah, just sounds great. Yeah, you mentioned. Lovely, accepting, wonderful, warm. Open people, or whatever. But yeah. We'll get together and get a drink after all this. I would love it. I would love
Where are your flowers?
I came last minute.
I like these too.
Oh, no, that one takes okay, go get
I think I did.
Here's the card.
You say at the end of the movie?
You got to see it.
David. Whatever you want to call me.
Can we get a picture? She wanted to get a picture.
I'll take it. Just take it.
Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Olam Chesed Yibaneh.
Okay, so that was me and DeShean earlier today at the immigration rally in front of the Dearborn police station, and I'm trying the new OBS software, so hopefully this is working all right. And so we thought we'd analyze immigration. We spoke last week about these immigration issues and protests, and then here we had it today, largely ordered by the Jewish community. We had a huge protest, not a huge protest, but a few hundred people in front of the Dearborn police station, the ICE facility. And okay, so let me hope the sound okay, so I gotta switch the microphone. I apologize about that. I have the wrong microphone on. Okay, I apologize. Gotta get this fixed. Okay, so hopefully now I got the right microphone in. This will sound all right. I appreciate people tuning in, and I'm trying to work through the OBS, so I'll be able to screen share some of the video I captured earlier and do a screen and screen. So hopefully this is working, and we're showing some more videos, so I hope that fixed the sound problem. So DeShean, you want to give an overview of what we saw earlier, what happened earlier, your thoughts on it?
Well, the grassroots becomes a question of who is the grassroots and who are they representing, because by whose standards? That's always the question. We see the actors, we see the issue, but the representation is what is to be determined.
Yeah, I mean, we had debated Rashida Tlaib last week and the Jewish community's effort to kind of oust Rashida, and versus the the progressive liberal community that largely likes Rashida, and the institutionalized Jewish community is pretty skeptical. However, the progressive activist social justice warrior seems to be on board and fully in support. And so there was a protest. It was called by different elements of various SJPs of the various Jewish community, and it was in front of the police station where some of the ICE raids are being carried out from. And so that was just now, and then we were just on Halsey, and there were speeches. It was kind of a, I mean, these are national things that's going across everywhere in the nation. And let me just check this again real quick to see that I got the sound working, because okay, so the sound is working, so we appreciate people tuning in. We'll be showing some more video in a bit, and we just got off Halsey, and we're talking about immigration and the impact of immigration, grassroots protest here in Detroit. To some extent, you have the Arab community that's very affected by deportations, certain elements of it, not the whole Arab community, but there are elements of the Arab community here in Metro Detroit that are facing deportations. In the Hispanic community, although Detroit's pretty far north of the border, but Michigan's a pretty strong ICE supporting state, and there's a lot of support for ICE here, and like Michigan is a red state in many ways, and so Michigan operates ICE deportations extremely strongly, a law and order state, home rule state, and so people are protesting, and we were there, we were on the scene, we were just talking about it with Halsey, and kind of this like greater element of the Jewish community, our contemporaries, our fellow Jews in Detroit who feel very strongly about this issue. And I'm not sure if DeShean wants to chime in with some of his opinions.
Yeah, like, to be fair and for honest analysis, the battle lines are drawn And I just really want to focus on the grassroots aspect because, one has to ask questions like, are these activists who are presenting themselves to be grassroots, are they deep rooted enough within the communities to give a proper perspective about what they represent as a self-elected leader? That's always a question that is up in the air, so to speak. I don't want to say yay or nay or pro or con, but I just want to look at the leadership. Like, are these activists too bound by institutional charity and reinforcement to think outside of a political addendum, or are they operating independently? That's basically what we have to find out, Doooovid. And it like people showed up today. So basically, as the coming days come upon us, the leadership, the question becomes, do they get kind of stuck in a rut, or are they truly living up to the responsibility and standard that they projecting upon us? Because how effective are they? This is the question, like, is the issues framed in the right way? Are they clearly defined? The information, is it being disseminated amongst the host population that needs to hear it to be able to assert their political rights? All these questions come into play when you're talking about these issues, because we got to ask ourselves, is grassroots representation a real representation or a misrepresentation?
Yeah, and we're going to play some of the speeches here. So I'm new with this OBS, so we're going to give a little commentary. But I got my in real life video, and people could view it. We had a little song at the beginning, some like different speeches from. It was cross organized with Hispanic community and the Arab community. CARE was one of the sponsors. There was a lot of Jews there. It was majority Jews. It was in Dearborn, and as I said, these protests are going on across the country. Certainly the Jewish community, even though we're not personally affected by what's going on, I don't know, there has been a handful of Jews that have faced deportations or whatever, but generally Jews are not getting deported or rounded up. However, Jewish value to the larger Jewish community, not necessarily the Orthodox community or the Zionist community, but the majority of Jews in America are extremely worried about what's happening, and there's been a grassroots efforts across the country to protest ICE, protest these deportations, to make a stop to what's going on, and so that hit Detroit, and we had probably like 10 different Jewish organizations that were there. Rabbis from multiple different congregations were there, and speeches and little poems, and a lot of it was a repeat. Like I did last week Thursday, we had the ADL event in Metro Detroit about stranger among us, and the Jewish value of caring for the stranger. And so a lot of the speeches were almost the exact same speech that people had given at the ADL event the week forward, but this one was in front of the Dearborn police station that is working together with ICE, and it also had partners from the Arab and Hispanic community, and this one had 3 local Congress people, namely Rashida Tlaib, Andy Levin, and Debbie Dingel. And in my aspect, Rashida Tlaib was like a real star of this, and I'll play their speech at the end in a little bit, and let DeShean chime in with his thought.
Well, again, like I'm raising the issue about the integrity of the protests. On both sides. You mentioned earlier we had a private conversation about the whole aspect of social climbing, and I think that's 2 sides to the same coin, because you look at one perspective, the Jewish perspective, and then the Arab American perspective, the representatives who were there, and I'm not talking about the elected officials, Rashida Tlaib. I'm talking about the local young Arab activists who spoke at this event. The question becomes, what are their motives? How qualified are they? How connected are they? Is it just a opportunity to self aggramize, like promote your own ego, or do you have the best interests of the people at heart? And this is what I'm saying as a political scientist, like the analysis of it. How deep into the neighborhoods are these people? Do they have rapport with the people who are voiceless, who are hard to reach, who are in the undesirable areas? Or it's just a big dog and pony show about, the media is here, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I don't care about these people, and I'm here to promote my own agenda. That's what I'm talking about. Like, grassroots, is this the real grassroots, or just a version of what the grassroots is supposed to be about, based on other histories and other movements?
Yeah, and I would say that kind of this rabbi here speaking had been down in El Paso and is one of the big activists fighting deportation. That's like the main thing he's doing. But some of these other rabbis are congregational leaders that just felt obligated to be part of this. But I mean, generally, kind of Jews are a management class, and so that even the activist level, it's more kind of management, kind of telling other people what to do, versus like a grass level of actually helping immigration, or like protests. That's what we do. We protest. We tell people what to do, so to say, as opposed to probably the Hispanic group and the Muslim group are more actually active in trying to do something for the immigrants. These are, we didn't have, we had at the ADL one on Thursday, a Jewish man who goes to the same synagogue, good man, who's actually an immigration attorney and provides legal services to help people with immigration. So none of the organizations today were necessarily active in immigration. They're just concerned people that are concerned about the deportation. So CARE is a Islamic organization that is probably active in trying to do something for the civil rights of the people. So in Detroit, it's mostly Iraqis that are facing deportation, and you have Hispanics in Detroit. There's a reasonable population of Hispanics, and there is ICE going around rounding up, God forbid, Hispanics that are illegally in the country. So we had those organizations represented. The Jews that were part of it were more just concerned citizens. Some of them may be more active than others in actually doing something, but it was more just to have our voice heard, and to people should know that we're concerned about this going on. We don't want it going on, and we're trying to figure out what it is we could do to stop it. And it could be, God forbid, there's nothing we could do to stop it. That the president elections have consequences, and this is these rounds up and deportations might be the direction that America wants to move in.
Well, again, like, I don't want to say yay or nay. I want to have a very moderate perspective, in the middle, very transparent, very detailed, and on point. Again, I raised the issue of the integrity of the whole protest, because we can't accurately say what the other intention was, coming from any party or any interest. We know that definitely the issue is there. It's a public issue, and it's in the public consciousness, and how it's represented and handled is a whole nother question that we have to define. Even on both sides of the aisle, the two different activist groups, I don't think religion itself is as important as self-promotion in this particular situation, because yes, these are two groups that you can ID. You got the Muslim group, you got the Jewish group, you got the other people that's there, but outside of institutional organizing and, like we said, grassroots, how much is this is really grassroots? I would like to see the effective results at the polls, because I think a lot of this is polling issues and popular issues amongst the populace, and that's what I'm here to, shed some light on, because it's easy to point the finger in one direction or the other, but the end game is pretty much who has the sway, and that's going to boil down to the integrity, the charisma, and the outlook and the framing of the issues, because yes, we know, but at the same token, we don't know. And what is this new grassroots movement? It's still yet to be defined.
Yeah, this was the humanist Rabbi Falik, who DeShean had some serious disagreements with his speech. But I mean, from a political perspective, the elections are more than a year away. President Trump probably has largely the authority, because ICE is a federal cabinet level thing to try to enforce certain immigration laws. So there have to be a rise up of public pressure, which happened a few weeks ago when President Trump warned he was going to do mass deportations. And since then you've had not just the Jewish community, but many different people stepping up to protests to try to discourage President Trump from carrying out these deportations. So I'm just waiting for the next election, and this might play into it. There is not much that can be done. Like if the presidential power, the lawsuits have been done. We know Judge Mark Goldsmith here in Metro Detroit ruled in favor of the refugees, saying that the U.S. can't deport them, and the Sixth Circuit overruled him, and it might go to the Supreme Court. So, in terms of the legal political perspective, it's going to go to the courts, or it's going to go to the executive power of the president as the commander-in-chief, who's in charge of the federal ICE agency and the local police departments that cooperate with them. So in Detroit, generally the Detroit Police Department is not heavily cooperating with ICE, as where the Dearborn Police Department is largely cooperating with ICE. So that was the purpose of this protest, targeting the Dearborn Police Department and say, we do not want you cooperating with ICE. And there could be political pressure, there might be some elected positions, or the Dearborn Police Department might say, we're going to cooperate with ICE despite the protests. And this was a peaceful protest, no one got arrested. On the Democratic debate the second day, 20 people got arrested, and reality is they could arrest people all day. So we could keep on protesting, we could keep on getting arrested, and it's going to come out into the public opinion. And this is what's happening right now. This is the issue that Americans are talking about at their dinner tables across the country: immigration, illegal immigration, deportations, roundups, child separations, and issues like that.
Yes, but I want to elaborate on a level of one thing I found to be very interesting is that historically African Americans were on the forefront of the protest movement, and in this particular protest speech coming from the different parties, I found it to be quite troubling that in the hierarchy of grassroots protesters, that the African American presence as well as acknowledgement was at the lower end of the totem pole. Still yet, even with these critical and very hot button issues, these organized protest movements of alleged grassroots movements still put African Americans in a subjugated position. And see, that's the point that
I don't understand what I'm saying. I mean, there were basically no African Americans.
No.
At
Let me
this
clarify.
event.
Let me
the only
clarify.
African Americans that I saw there were the Fox News reporters.
No. This woman in
immigration.
particular, let me explain. When she listed off her list of grievances, this Chilean woman, she made a halfway reference to black. You know what I'm saying? She didn't acknowledge African American. She said black. So basically, in her conscious mind and thought that, yes, she acknowledged herself. The Latino community, which they were there in the early stages of the civil rights movement. So much respect to them. But I'm just saying the proper current framing of these issues with the annexation of black political influence being attached to these particular issues, and we still don't really know if it's in the best interest of the black community to do such, it's still a lack of respect that's being shown. And I don't know if it's intentional, but this is why we're here to discuss the analysis of the grassroots movement. Like, do they feel and think that the black political vote is irrelevant to the point where it doesn't have to be mentioned, or maybe it's more of an honorary mention versus a more active role that African Americans have historically played in such situations? That's still yet to be seen. And that's basically what I want to highlight, because that's not the history and the trajectory that I'm used to. And I'm not saying just because I'm an African American man, but I'm saying just historically, as far as political actors and content and the issues being presented as they are.
Yeah, so it did start raining a little bit. It just drizzled for a few minutes. And, largely immigration's a non-issue to African Americans. They might have opinions on it, but it's not one of the major issues facing the African American community. The Jewish community, even though immigration is not an issue facing the Jewish American community, Jews are very concerned about it, as where African Americans do not seem very concerned one way or another. Generally, African American community tends pro-immigration, but not enough to show up to a protest or make it one of the major issues that they vote on. So here in Metro Detroit, you have the Arab community that is directly affected by deportations, and the Hispanic community, as you could see from the video, there are almost no African Americans that so to say, it's not their issue. They might individual African Americans might have opinions on it. Brenda Lawrence, my local representative, I'm sure she has opinions. She's denounced it, but not enough necessarily to show up and make it a major issue. So I'm not exactly sure.
Well, let me clarify more, in the sense that African Americans basically are the only group in this country besides Native Americans who were brought here against their own will. So basically the disconnect comes in because no, African Americans are not immigrants. Neither are Native Americans. And the point is that the historical gains that have been shown to, for better words, the protest class, have all been framed by the different African American issues. And I'm just saying the level of inclusion that these people claim to represent is minuscule, and it's apparent because of the way that they frame the issues. It isn't that full partnership. It's more of a pre-scripted situation. At least that's the way it came off to me. The way I interpreted it from being there, watching how it all unfolded with the particular dynamics at play. So these are issues that have to be resolved because, the issues at hand are going to become weaker or stronger by way of how the issues are framed in the particular representatives in the talking heads that present the issues. If you got just a bunch of detached people who are spewing out their opinion, that's just exactly what it's going to be, opinion. It's not going to be any effective results involved because it's missing elemental presence of the players that can make the difference. The people who have those inroads into the crevices of those communities that are unreachable by sort of mainstream candidates and people who are disconnected from that population in that group.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure the point DeShean's trying to make. Obviously, in politics, there's coalition building, and you need, in order to win elections or to get legislation passed, you need coalitions formed. In terms of immigration, deportations, it seems that the African American community, blacks, are basically on the sideline. It's not a major issue to them. they are part of the greater Democratic coalition, and for other issues, that possibly are important to them, like healthcare, education, the generic issues that face everybody, possibly things like police brutality, criminal reform that might be somewhat related to this, to deportations. But generally, I say that I just don't see it as a black issue. Like immigration is just not a black issue. You're not going to find the black community making a big deal out of immigration, and that's why you see that they didn't really show up. There wasn't too much talk about it. If you listen to the different news channels or periodicals or talking shows that are they might mention it and talk about what's going on. Brenda Lawrence did submit a letter saying that she's opposed to the ICE roundups, and the Black Caucus, Democratic Caucus, it generally is opposed to deportations and the roundups, but it's not a major issue to them. They're not making it a major campaign issue. To the Jewish community, to the Hispanic community, to the Arab community, this is one of the most important issues. This will be one of the major issues that Jews, Hispanics, Arabs are voting on. The black community, it's unlikely that they're going to make a decisive vote, one candidate or the other, based on immigration.
Can I jump in for a second? It becomes an issue of class warfare because, from what it seems to me, that these other groups have, in the recent past, discredited and omitted the African American political presence and voice. So therefore, now with the roundups and all this other stuff that's going on, like the African American support is critical to the framing of these issues. It can make or break the issue, because if African Americans withdraw, then it's just going to be seen as just the different variations of white people and their issues, and the majority of people in the inner city, like at the lower economic sphere, are unconcerned about anything that's concerning white economic domination over people in the city. Like gentrification is a huge issue right now.
Well, I agree that if African Americans sit this one out, the Democratic base of support will probably not be able to stop the deportations. Like, you need a broad coalition of the left base to say, we do not accept you doing this, and depending on how hard the right is willing to push on it, they'll need the full power of the left. And if the African American community decides that they don't have too much of a stake in the immigration issue, that President Trump might be strong, and he might continue to do the deportations and even to accelerate it. And that's possibly what we saw happen today. And we'll see the deportations. We've been having these protests. The Jewish community largely has been showing up in full steam. Saying even the Orthodox groups, like the African American community, have written letters and condemned the deportations, but they're not actively saying, like, you must stop this, protesting and making it make or break issue. And it seems that President Trump and his rally and the anti-immigrant stance on the right is stronger than the pro-immigrant stance on the left. And so DeShean's making the point that the African American community is staying out of this one, and the effect has been seen that the deportations are continuing. This protest, although a few hundred people showed up, may not get much news coverage. Besides for this stream, maybe Fox will play the interview. We'll play Rashida Tlaib's speech in a few minutes, and so the right wingers will probably purposely give airtime to Tlaib, Representative Tlaib, in order to rouse their base of anti-immigration stance. And we know that there's a base of tens of millions of America that are extremely against immigration, that support these deportations. And my guess would be that the center of America is pretty skeptical and worried about what's going on. But when you see who's willing to actively protest and get involved, not that many people.
Right, exactly. And even in the 13th district, regardless of what my personal issues are with Rashida Tlaib, her activity within the 13th district is really not that heavy. You know, she's in safe spaces in Dearborn, which is her home turf. You know, she's very comfortable within that community, you know, is very familiar. But outside of that community, you still have other populations like a strong Latino presence in the 13th district, you know, an African-American base, a lower economic Caucasian group, you know, working class whites. And she has basically untapped all those groups, you know, like she isn't knocking door to door and got her people out passing literature and getting signatures and all the other stuff we historically associate with campaigns and issues and all the other change in the legislation and all the stuff that you will associate with, you know, this type of passion. You know, it's a lack of, you know, I think people is just trying to figure out an easy way to get corporate dollars, you know, corporate manipulation, sympathy, you know, everything is about power brokering, you know, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a, you know, powered redistribution. You know, the grassroots people is trying to upgrade their power positions, and the powerful is trying to maintain. And so therefore, you know, back to the integrity issue, you know, what is the integrity of this new movement, whether they be grassroots or non-grassroots? You know, like, are they really passionate, or are they just playing the role? That's what it becomes.
Okay, you got anything else to say, or should I play the speeches from the Congress people?
Well, play the speeches.
Okay, so I apologize for my boomer tech here, so I want to make sure I have the technology to as good of a ability. So I'm going to use, I'm going to have to put on my mic. Hopefully the sound's going to be good, so I'm going to, I apologize, I'm new to the OBS. Jennifer had shown me how to do this, and I appreciate that, although I'm still not doing it as well as I had hoped. So I'm going to have to play the sound through with the speaker blasted, so hopefully people will be able to hear it.
But I was in Washington, D.C. and got off the plane to come here because I was in Washington for gun violence. And orange is the color of against gun violence. But I also want to say that I stand with my sister and my brother. I didn't even, honestly, I just got asked, would I come to read a Jewish prayer? And with Rashida, I wanted to stand in solidarity with the Jewish community because I represent Dearborn, the largest population of Arab Americans, Muslims in this country. And we must all I am proud of that, but we've got to stand up to hate. This country is being divided by fear and hatred, and it's wrong. We stand here today, members of all faiths. I see Cindy Garcia here, whose husband was deported to Mexico. I see people.
Okay, I just want to make sure this is working. I apologize for
in this country. And we must all I am proud of.
Okay, it's working.
People of all faiths that are being targeted. We must stand up to hate. And every one of us has that responsibility. Every one of us. When we see it, speak up and speak out. And we want to organize a take on hate effort as well in the next couple of weeks.
Rabbi Elena knows I just came from Calhoun County. I did a surprise unannounced visit to the detention center there. And I can tell you when I got in there, they refused my entry to come in and see the conditions. I'm going to still go back. And one of the things that I ended up doing, we were prepared and we saw four folks that were detained there, they're being detained there. And one is a survivor of human trafficking. And she's there for 10 days, severe PTSD, still has not got her medication. Oh, wow. I just sent an email out to ICE in regards to that. Another man he was complaining, he's diabetic and complaining about the fact that he's been there. It's going to be September 1st. He'll reach 180 days in detention, which now would violate his civil liberties. And when we talked to him, he broke down 3 or 4 times, just feeling helpless, didn't know what to do. Another woman all the way from Toledo, Ohio, brought here to Calhoun County, and she told me the first day they put her in a room, and she's like, where am I supposed to sleep? There were all these other people there. She ended up having to sleep literally next to the toilet for 3 days. This is happening right here in Michigan. And so I want you to know, we have to continue demanding access into these facilities to expose it. Because the way we're going to get the city of Dearborn and all those to really truly divest, to really truly disconnect with ICE, is going to be to push that they are currently violating national detention standards. There are standards, believe me, there are. We are just not forcing them to comply with them. And we have to comply, especially if it's medical, especially if they're survivors of trauma. This young woman was just in tears. Her 6-year-old daughter, she has no idea how she's going to be able to be reunited with her. And so it's really important as we do this to elevate, is to give the evidence to places like this who are like, well, we're not involved in picking up. We're just holding them until we send them to the airport. And you hear them say this. Trust me, I have a great relationship with the chief here. He's always been extremely sympathetic with sometimes our call for justice and accountability for even his own department. But the way we do it is by telling him how our own administration is violating people's civil liberties and civil rights and violating international human rights. And that's when we have to tell them they have to step away and not have connection with somebody that is an organization that is so rogue, so un-American, and so not who we are. And so I appreciate you all being here and for your courage to stand up today.
I just wanna, we're just like a Jewish kid, a Christian kid, and a Muslim kid from Detroit up here. And on behalf of the Jewish community, I want to thank all the Christians and Muslims and humanists and atheists and everybody who came out to pray with us today for justice. And I want to just invite you all, this is awkward. I want to invite you to a funeral. We're fighting deportations of all kinds, and we're fighting deportations of Iraqi nationals from our southeast Michigan and all around the country. And one Iraqi national who was deported in June, Jimmy al-Dawood, who was never set foot in Iraq in his life. He was born in a refugee camp in Athens, who had schizophrenia and had diabetes, and he was deported, picked up off the streets of Detroit, and they said, if you go with us quietly, we won't make it difficult for you. And they flew him to Iraq. How much money do we spend on this, by the way? 2 ICE agents all the way there and back, plus him. Just for what? They didn't let him get any money. They didn't let him get any insulin. They didn't let him pack a bag. They didn't let him call his family. And he died a week ago today. And because of a diabetic crisis. And on yesterday, another person deported to Iraq, who also is Chaldean, a Christian, who is going to the church, was shot in the leg 2 times. And he survived. He's in the hospital. And we're going to have to tell this story. People are going to continue to die at our border and in these countries when we deport them for no reason except to expand the base of a white supremacist. Not in our country. So we'll find out when we get Jimmy's body back. What do you think it feels like to be a freshman member of Congress who tries, we go to try to help the people, and the big accomplishment is to get somebody's body back here so he can be buried next to his mom? I'm sorry, that sucks. That does not feel like an accomplishment. So we need you all. We go to Washington, but I'm telling you, none of us believe that we make history. You make history. And we need you to press the Congress, to press the city of Dearborn, to press the administration to change course now and provide dignity to immigrants in our country. Thank you.
NBC says that 24 people have died in ICE custody since Trump came to office. We'll take a moment of silence for them and for Jimmy Al-Daoud and everyone and every child especially who has died in this crisis. And that moment of silence will close with the shofar, which I'll invite you to call with me. Call with me. Tekiah. Shivarim. Teruah. With this last one, we're just gonna let our hearts break. Tekiah Gedolah.
Okay, I'm still getting used to using this OBS software, so let me readjust this. Apologize for tech. So, you got any comment on that, DeShean?
Yeah, again, like I was reiterating, the whole question becomes the integrity of what they are doing, because you have a lot of fast talkers but slow thinkers. Like how much is being done, by the so-called grassroots, as well as the elected officials of government, and I'm more so want to pull the card of the grassroots, because you got people that walk past people every day on the street, don't speak, they actively implement classism, but yet try to preach to people and say what their value system should be. And I just find that to be problematic, because no way, you can't sell that same bill of goods. And that's what I'm saying. I want to question the integrity as well as the actual movement on the ground. Because also for better words, and I don't want to be derogatory, but this is just a bunch of bad acting, in my opinion, because if nothing is going to be followed up on, then what's the point in the first place?
Yeah, I'm genuinely supportive, because I'm although I'm conservative, I'm largely pro-immigration, and you can argue the motives or the purity of the people acting, or rabbis who are at the same time trying to advance their own careers or different things. But I thought it was largely a positive rally. The hearts of the people were largely in the right place. It was peaceful. A clear message was expressed. we did some rituals and sang some songs, and to me it was largely positive. I mean, you could question, like Jews in general are saying, okay, we're a management class, so to say, so we kind of just want to tell people what to do, as opposed to, how one thing isn't going to work. Is the effort of the Jewish community going to have any effect towards the deportation policies of President Trump? And you say, like, no, it's ineffectual, and it could be that there's nothing the Jewish community, even if the Jewish community did our best and put everything together, that the pressures against immigration might be so strong, like in 1924 or different periods of time in history where the Jews were extremely pro-immigration, but we lost at the ballot box. We lost because we're in a democracy, and the majority of Americans disagreed with us.
Well, I want to say again that, if they was really serious about, and I think they thought that they were serious about what they were saying and what they were doing, they would have went out of their way to get a African American representative and spokesperson there, because the omission of African American presence and voice is going to hurt them. And the African Americans are the historic protest class. You look at the movements of the past. I don't even have to get into it, but you know what I'm talking about. Dr. King, and even back further than that, it just seems like it's a systematic collusion amongst these various groups, who feel that they have arrived, that the African Americans are no longer important enough for them to even include. So therefore, that's what I'm trying to get a feel for, is that it's the new grassroots movement. Do they value the same presence and contribution of African Americans as they once did? It's still yet to be seen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't read anything into that. Like, I don't know who. I know the organizers of the event. I was not part of organizing it. I don't know who they reached out to. It's possible they reached out to Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence and other people, and maybe they couldn't make it. Maybe they reached out to people in the African American community and they said no, they weren't interested, or maybe they didn't reach out at all. I have no idea. To me, it just seems that immigration is not an important issue in general to the African American community. So I'm not sure that this would have been the type event that would have included or been of interest to the larger African American political class. Ironically, the Palestinians have been very good at teaming up with the African American community.
I disagree with that statement,
because police militarization of the police. From Palestine to there were a place in. So ironically, the Palestinians have garnered quite a bit of teamwork with the African American community. That's a
misnomer. That's not true.
In terms of police brutality.
That's not true.
Militarization of the police.
For better words, and I won't mention the movement, like all these new partnerships and new allegiances are just what they are, new. And nobody, like, in my opinion, as a political scientist, I see them as politically disenfranchisement. I don't see the Palestinians as having no political or economic benefit.
We know your
for
opinion.
The plight.
Obviously, you're biased.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying politically, that's not, smart politics. No group is going to promote any other group's
Yeah, but you're
interest.
just biased as a Jew.
No, I'm not.
Your opinion's almost worthless because you're a Jew. You're
no,
biased.
no,
Obviously, you're a Jew. You're
no.
biased.
The bottom line is that no group puts another group's interest before their own personal, political, economic, and social interests. So that's just across the board. That's just a human right, and a person, something has got to be wrong, or they got to be compromised if they do.
Yeah, we saw this with the Women's March and the squad, where there has been an increasing recognition of the plight of Palestinians by the African American community, as where the immigrant community, it's unclear whether there's been some sort of connection between the African American community and the plight of immigrants. So obviously, you have concerned African Americans. I can't speak for them. You could go to speak to them, go to their resources, their YouTubes, their periodicals. about how they feel about the deportations and the Trump policies. Obviously, generally the African American community is very democratic and unlikely to support President Trump. But is it President Trump's immigration policies per se that make them against President Trump? It's unlikely that that's one of the major reasons why the African American community is upset with President Trump, due to his immigration policies.
Well, it's still yet to be seen. It's a very multi-layered issue. There's no blanket statement that can say what the African American community will or won't do. Like the so-called appointed leaders don't represent the mass, and I think, like we were saying priorly, that the grassroots movement is more of like an influencer than these self-appointed political leaders who have been, in my words, compromised.
Yes, I mean, who do you think makes up the anti-deportation, anti-ICE? You saying, like, how big is the movement against deportations, against ICE? Is it like half Jews? Is it nationwide? Like in the South, on the southern border, where you have large amounts of Hispanics. So in Metro Detroit, it's unclear. That's not representative because there's not a large Hispanic community here. So it could be on the southern border. It'd be a much different issue.
Right. Well, I'll say the demographics matter. That's what I was talking about, the grassroots presence. And do these people...
I mean, it seems here that Jews are really the only ones who care.
No. That's irrelevant to what I'm saying. The grassroots, as it's been labeled, how grassroots are they? I don't care about a person's ethnic background or socioeconomic status. When you say grassroots, you talking about the people that's literally at ground zero, in the streets, close to the issues, with their fingers on the pulse. And I'm not so sure that this new grassroots that was represented today have that finger on the pulse. I think it's a lot of detached, sentiments. People want to be, do-gooders and connected with the issues, but I just think their worldview, in particular backgrounds, serve as a stumbling block because, they don't know what it's like to be displaced or, have a lack of resource like these subjects that they claim to represent. And so it gets into a lot of more nuanced issues that make out a particular outcome. That's all I'm saying. It's like, are we viewing this right? Is it being framed correctly? And what is the ethics and morals attached to it? And that's just all fair questions to ask because, you can't claim to be a true representative of any cause, of any people, unless you are in touch with the people.
Yeah, I'm not sure what your point connected to immigration and ICE. You're saying how big of an issue?
But that's the point,
you
exactly.
don't really care one way or another.
No. That's not what I said.
It's not a big issue to you.
No,
You
that's
don't
not
really
what I
care.
said. I'm just saying, like, does falsely represent is to do no justice. Unless you actually, have a working knowledge and have effective results, like the immigration attorney that you and I know, he definitely actively has an active hand in the outcome of these immigrants and subjects that's being violated because he's qualified. He's an attorney by trade who's very passionate about what he does. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the people that's out here just doing protests. I'm talking about how much of a hand do they have in actively changing the outcome of these displaced population.
Well, almost zero. So we're just concerned citizens who are scared and upset that this is what our government's doing, and we basically have zero power. All we could do is make a protest. That's what more could we do?
Well, it's a lot that you could do. Education, you could spread the issue. Signatures, signatures are a very important part of changing legislation. Letter writing campaigns. Congressmen and congresswomen and elected officials pay attention to their constituents. If you have a letter writing campaign coming in on a particular issue, they pay attention. That's what can be done versus just talking, and it bring, like, I just know, living in the city of Detroit as a long-term resident, the majority of the population, and you can take any group, Latinos, African Americans, working poor whites, any displaced people, and they are very suspicious of like outsiders coming in talking about they represent their personal issues. And I'm just saying, from a political scientist perspective, these are all things that have to be thought about.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a tough, say, okay, because the Jewish community is basically unaffected by Trump's immigration policy, because Jews, half of the Jews in the world already live here in the U.S. Like, the only Jews that would likely be coming to America would be coming from Israel. And although there is some restrictions on visas and some issues, there have been Israelis being deported. There are Jews in Hispanic countries or whatever, but generally these policies are not affecting the Jewish community, besides the fact that the Jewish community is generally pro-immigration, and the Holocaust and memories of these type policies that but whether we're representing the Hispanic community or the illegal immigrant to alien community, or whether we're just voicing our concern that we do not want our government acting in this way. And then you just have regular politics. God forbid the making sausage is a dirty thing, and you have to make the coalition. That's just how politics works.
Yeah, it works in various ways, but I think we pretty much covered the rally and protests as much as we could. What's your thoughts on that, Doooovid?
Yeah, man, I wanted to get it out there. I went there. I wanted to, although I'm conservative, I'm not. I mean, I do have some social justice warrior. People. I've been involved in protesting Trump's immigration bans from 2016. You could check my YouTube page. I've been posting these protests for years. Although generally, I'm conservative leaning. I have questions about how institutional Jewish power kind of operates, or even my Jewish colleagues, how they go about things. But they didn't ask my opinion. They don't need to ask my opinion. They're probably never going to ask my opinion. But I do agree with them that I'm worried about these protests. And I showed up not just as a streamer. Maybe DeShean was there more objectively just to see what was going on. I kind of dragged him there. But me, I was there in support of the protest and showing as a concerned American. And I'm not trying to speak on behalf of communities that didn't ask me to speak on behalf of them. And as of now, no one's asked me to speak on behalf of them. I'm an independent scholar who speaks only for myself. However, I did want to give voice, so we had the stream. I went over the video. I played someone. I encouraged you to watch this. We talked about Rashida Tlaib last week. I wouldn't mind trying to interview. I didn't ask her for an interview. She might give me an interview. It'd be interesting to speak to her. And the whole part of, okay, like, what if I did speak to her? You saw that Rashida Tlaib, Andy Levin, and Debbie Dingel were up there, and even as elected freshman Congress people, they said they can't do anything. They're not having any success at all in combating President Trump's immigration policies. So, the Jewish community, as of now, has been doing these protests across the country with very little success. For years now. Maybe it's possible that if these protests hadn't been going on, the President Trump would have built the wall, would have had mass deportations. And these protests are a small drop in the bucket that raise public awareness and show, is there really a silent majority of America that supports these deportations, supports these detention centers, concentration camps, if you want to call them, or is it just a minority of Trump supporters, and we'll be able to put pressure on them, and they'll drop this from their agendas. So that's why I went to show this is one of my issues. I don't want America doing this, although generally I'm resigned to democracy, and if the majority American will is opposite mine, I'm still going to try to live according to God's law and be a just, righteous person. It's hard to be a just person, a righteous person in an unrighteous world. It's difficult making these decisions. But I commend the rabbis and the Jewish people that showed up at this rally. Like, DeShean's critiques are probably valid. but I'm not here to critique them. I support what they did, and I'm in agreement with them on this issue.
Yeah, and my concluding remark is that anytime people can come together and have intelligent discourse, it's a good thing. And that rally for me, I was able to see some people that I didn't see in a long time, and I in particular didn't get along with a lot of those people priorly, but a lot of peace was made. So I can honestly say that that was the good thing for me.
Yeah, you could see my Ask the Rabbi one, where I talked for hours about immigration. I had to ask the rabbi, and like people came on, they want to know, like, why are Jews open borders? Why are Jews so in favor of immigration? You could check my videos on Luke for it. I've spent tens of hours, maybe hundreds of hours now, arguing in favor of immigration. I know that there's a lot of people who disagree with me, and that's fine. And I'm happy to have more arguments. I wanted to do the protest. I'm sitting here with DeShean, and you're right next to him in my house, and he disagrees with me. That's fine. I'm giving him space on my YouTube channel in my house to disagree with me. That's fine. And I assume these debates will be going on. And maybe last comments before we close up about what I said. Rashida Tlaib is going to rise and become the star of the Democratic Party. That's what I get. Like I thought she did very well today. I thought that she kind of outshined the other two Congress people, and I like her. I know you dislike her. You have your different issues, but I think at least in the carway when we were going from there to my house, you were kind of agreeing that.
Yeah, I will acknowledge the obvious, which she had a home court advantage, which is normal, and you pretty much can't deny the obvious, So yeah, in that immediate situation, I would say a lot of what you said is true.
And what do you think the implications are for the Jewish community, the Metro Detroit Jewish community, and Jewish communities across the nation?
Well, you know what?
Who are in a bind because
in an intelligent way. I'm just one single person. I do interact with the Jewish community, but it's just too much to deal. Too many working parts for me to have a correct assessment. So, I don't see the Jewish community being any different than anybody else in mainstream America.
But the Jewish community is different because these immigration and the opposition to the detention centers is stronger among the Jewish community than even the Hispanic
for those
community.
that put themselves out there is yet to be seen. But the mainstream working class educated community, I don't see being any different than anything else that I've already seen, and that's just my honest opinion.
Well, what about the fissures within the community, the institutional Jewish community that largely is unhappy with it, with the deportations, versus the lax status in the Democratic Party to really oppose it.
You have
the progressive Jewish community that might be pro BDS that's willing to step up on the lines to stop this, and the institutional Jewish community that's more wary of getting involved in this immigration deportation debate, even though they're probably widely opposed to it.
Well, I'm just saying it's still yet to be seen. I can't say what will or won't happen, but it's still yet to be seen.
Okay, so thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm glad we were on Halsey tonight, and I got a chance to show some of the video, and we talked, see in action some of what we've been talking about. So combining some sort of in real life, with our commentary, and see what it's like to be here in Detroit. You see in my video, we're right there with Rashida Tlaib. I would enjoy speaking with her and asking her some of these questions if it's possible. I didn't use my chance tonight because it was a busy night to kind of ask her if she would be open for an interview. But yeah, we're going to keep on talking. We're going to keep on being involved. Keep on streaming. I appreciate High Tea for the super chat, my very first super chat. Anyone who had at Doooovid or DeShean had a question, so do it now. Now's your last chance. And I'm not sure if we're going to stream next week or if people have topics that they're interested in hearing about, or something that's interesting enough for us to talk about. Hopefully we'll get good response from being on Halsey. And I'm not sure coming up if there's interesting things. There's probably going to be more protests. There's another immigration event at the Holocaust Museum in Metro Detroit. I'm probably not going to go to that, although I predict that that President Trump will continue with the deportation. These protests will step up as the deportations increase. There will be more and more protests, so this issue is not going to go away, and immigration is probably the issue that I've dedicated more time than any other topic on YouTube. I mean, multiculturalism, it tends to go hand in hand with immigration because I'm pro-multicultural. Generally, that's why I favor different people being allowed to come into the country. So this isn't going anywhere. So yeah, I mean, Josh, me and DeShean were on Halsey at 9 o'clock, and right after that ended, we took a few-minute break and then started this stream. So if you want to see that, it might already be past the 2-hour limits. You might have to wait till Halsey's done to catch the whole thing, but encourage people to I'll even put that in the link before we sign off. You got anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, thank everybody for tuning in, and I will always share my honest perspective with you guys.
Okay, yeah, it's too late in the Halsey video, so you can't see me and DeShean now. You'll have to wait till Halsey's finished and the video is uploaded, but that was a nice conversation. So Halsey kind of interviewed DeShean and got a feel, and we talked about kind of being outliers in the Jewish community or streaming and different things moving forward. So blessings, everybody. Have a great night. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I look forward to more streams. I don't have any plan for the rest of the week. So probably Sunday with Church of Entropy will be the next week in review. Have a good night, everybody.